You can fix almost anything in your house with a YouTube video and a bad attitude. You'd rather wrestle a problem for 4 hours alone than send one text asking for help. And somewhere along the way, you decided that this makes you strong. It doesn't, though. To a psychologist, it makes you readable. I'm Frank, and I've spent a long time watching the way people your age move through the world. The stuff you're proudest of, doing it all yourself, never leaning on anybody, staying calm while everyone around you loses it. A psychologist looks at those exact habits and sees something you've never been told. Where you see strength, they see a kid who realized early that nobody was coming. So today, we're taking 4 habits you think of as your personality, and we're showing you where they actually came from. Let's start with the one you're wearing like a badge. You don't ask for help. Not for the big stuff, not for the small stuff. You'll carry all the groceries in one trip and risk a hernia before you make 2. You'll drive an hour out of your way rather than call someone for directions to their own house. If something breaks, your first thought isn't, "Who can help me?" It's, "I'll handle it." You always handle it. There's a word for this when it goes past healthy, and the word is hyperindependence. And here's where it gets interesting. Psychologists don't classify hyperindependence as a strength or a personality type. They classify it as a trauma response. It usually shows up in people whose caregivers were absent, inconsistent, or just stretched too thin to respond when a kid needed something. The lesson lands quietly. People aren't reliable, so don't need them. And a kid who learns that doesn't grow out of it. He grows up and buys his own house and still won't let anybody help carry the couch. The clinical version of this has an even sharper name. It's called parentification. That's when the roles flip, when the child ends up doing the job the adult was supposed to do. Making dinner, watching the younger ones, reading the mood of the house and managing it. Being the responsible one before you had any business being responsible for anything. Kids who grow up parentified tend to become adults who can't put the weight down, because nobody ever told them they were allowed to. So that thing where you're the rock everybody leans on, the one who never falls apart, you didn't pick that. It's a job you got handed around age 9 and never quit. All right, habit number 2. And this one's quieter because you can't see it from the outside. Somebody asks how you're doing, and you say, "Fine." Not as a dodge, you actually mean it, because you genuinely don't know what else to report. Someone asks what you're feeling in the middle of something hard, and there's just a blank where the answer should be. You can tell them what you think. You've always got an opinion. But what you feel? That dial doesn't seem to go anywhere. This has a name too, and most people have never heard it. It's called Alexithymia. It literally means no words for feelings. It's not that you don't have emotions. You've got the whole set, same as anybody. It's that the wiring between having the feeling and naming the feeling never fully connected. You'll feel your jaw tighten and your stomach drop and have no idea that the word for it is afraid. Researchers estimate it affects around 1 in 10 people. And here's the part that lands. In men, it runs closer to 1 in 8, almost double the rate in women. Now, where does it come from? A team at Stanford ran the numbers on this and found something hard to argue with. Childhood maltreatment predicts alexithymia in adulthood, and of all the types, emotional neglect was one of the strongest predictors, stronger in some ways than the louder kinds of harm. Their reasoning was almost simple. When something's clearly wrong, a kid at least knows something's wrong. But when the harm is an absence, when nobody asks how you feel, nobody names it for you, nobody sits with you in it, there's nothing to point at. You can't heal a wound you were never shown. Think about how a kid actually learns feelings. He doesn't read a chart. He falls down, he looks up, and somebody's face tells him how big a deal this is. Somebody says, "You're frustrated," or "You're sad," or "That scared you." And slowly, the kid learns to do it himself. Now picture a house where, most afternoons, there's no face to look up at. The kid still has every feeling. He just never gets the subtitles. So he grows up fluent in what he thinks and completely lost in what he feels. Functional, capable, running the whole show. And somewhere in there, quietly empty. By the way, funny thing about going through your whole life saying, "I'm fine." Eventually, somebody really needs you to say something truer than that, and you reach for it, and the cupboard's bare. That's not the cupboard being broken. It's a cupboard nobody ever stocked. A lot of you have been in the comments sharing stories about exactly this. The houses you grew up in, the things you only connected years later. Those messages are what made me sit down and actually write the book. It's called Psychology of Gen X, and it's in the description. And to the people already on the Patreon, and the ones thinking about it, you're the reason this channel keeps going. Subscribers watch ad-free. Your name goes in the credits. Links below, QR codes on screen. Habit number 3. This one hides as humility, so it's sneaky. You don't trust your own read on things. Something feels off in a situation, and your gut is screaming, but instead of acting on it, you talk yourself out of it. You replay conversations at midnight, certain you said the wrong thing. You need to check, double check, get a second opinion, and even then there's a little voice that says you've probably got it wrong anyway. From the outside, you look careful. Inside, it's exhausting. People call this self-doubt and treat it like a confidence problem, like you just need a better morning routine and some affirmations in the mirror. But for a lot of people, the root isn't confidence at all. It's information. A kid figures out who he is by bouncing himself off the adults around him. He does something and watches the reaction. He shares a thought and sees if anybody picks it up. That feedback is how he builds an internal sense of, "I'm okay, my read on things is basically sound." Now take that feedback away. Not with cruelty, just with absence. The thoughts you brought home landed on nobody. The wins didn't get noticed. The hard days went unmentioned. A kid in that house doesn't conclude, "My parents were busy." A kid concludes something much worse and much quieter. That what goes on inside him isn't worth responding to. Carry that into adulthood and you get someone who's accomplished 100 things and still can't quite believe his own judgment. Who needs outside proof for what he already knows. Who apologizes for taking up space he paid for. Dr. Janice Webb, the psychologist who basically named this whole pattern, calls it childhood emotional neglect. Her line for it is sharp. She says the way your parents treated your feelings becomes the way you treat yourself. If your inner world got ignored back then, you grow up and do the ignoring yourself. You become, in a strange way, the parent who wasn't quite there, except now you're doing it to yourself. And here's the cruel little twist on it. The doubt doesn't make you worse at things. You're usually right. You read the room better than anybody. You saw the problem coming weeks ago. You just can't make yourself believe the one person who's been right all along, which is you. Last habit. And this is the one that ties the whole thing together, because it's the others wearing a nice coat. You cannot receive. Somebody tries to give you something, help, a compliment, a gift, a hand, and your whole body tightens up like they're trying to pickpocket you. You deflect the compliment. You insist on paying. Somebody does something kind, and a low hum of guilt starts up until you can pay it back. The second you owe somebody, you can't rest until the scales are even again. You give freely. Taking feels like a trap. This is self-sufficiency cranked all the way up past the point where it helps anybody, including you. And Webb found that emotionally neglected adults often build their entire idea of a good life around it. They come to believe, deep down, that being okay means needing nothing from anyone. Complete self-reliance, treated like the goal instead of the wound it's covering. So you end up safe and capable and walled off, wondering why connection feels like something other people are better at. Now, let's talk about why so many of you are nodding right now. Because this isn't really about a few bad parents. Something structural happened to your whole generation, and you can see it in the numbers. In 1950, about a third of women were in the workforce. By 1980, right when a lot of you were coming up, it was over half. Add a divorce rate that was climbing fast, and you get the same arithmetic playing out in millions of houses at once. More adults at work, fewer adults home, and a long stretch of afternoon between the last school bell and the sound of a car in the driveway. Hours, every day, that belong to nobody but you. And here's what nobody framed correctly at the time. They sold those afternoons as freedom, independence, building character. And for the practical stuff, sure, you learned to run a household before you could drive. But a kid alone in a quiet house all afternoon learns more than how to make a sandwich. He learns, hour by hour, that this is how it is. You handle yourself. You don't broadcast what's going on inside because there's nobody in the next room to hear it anyway. You get good at being alone because the alternative is noticing how alone you are. That's not a moral failing in your parents. Most of them were drowning, doing the best they could with a country that had quietly stopped making room for a parent to be home. But the kid in that house didn't know any of the economics. The kid only knew the house was empty. And he adapted, the way kids always do, brilliantly, and at a cost he wouldn't get the bill for until decades later. So add it all up. The independence that won't let anybody help. The blank where the feelings should be. The doubt that survives every piece of evidence to the contrary. The hands that can give all day and can't take a thing. 4 habits you've been calling just how I am. 4 adaptations a kid made to a situation no kid should have had to adapt to. Call them flaws if you want. They're really the proof that you were smart enough to survive something with no one standing next to you. Quick thing before I go. I put together a book called Psychology of Gen X. It came out of doing this channel and realizing all of these topics were really one bigger story about a generation that raised itself. Links below. And to everybody on the Patreon, thank you, genuinely. If you've been thinking about it, it's there when you're ready. Ad-free videos, your name in the credits. You can scan the QR code on screen. Here's the part worth keeping. Every one of these habits was the right answer once. A kid in an empty house who learned to need nothing, feel nothing out loud, trust nobody's red but his own, and carry the whole thing alone? That kid was being smart. He was surviving. The problem is the war ended a long time ago, and nobody told the soldier he could put the pack down. You're not that kid anymore. The house isn't empty. You're allowed to let somebody carry the couch. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.